Hey there, finance friends. This is our third video on the home purchase and mortgages. And in this last video, I just want to take a couple of minutes to address two little small things, subtle things, but that might be important down the line when you buy your first home. Okay? And these two things are points and the idea of refinancing. So let's talk briefly about them. We mentioned points a little bit. We touched on it in our first lecture. In our first lecture, when we went through the calculations right here, we can see it. We talked about the down payment and the closing costs, and then I brought up points, and we ignored that. But I want to bring up points now because points, they're very important to understand. So let's first think about what they are. You can think of points as effectively prepaid interest. We're going to use the term that they use in mortgage financing is buying points. So you'll sometimes hear, hey, I'm going to buy the points. You think, what does that mean? Well, here's the way it works. First thing, by definition, 1 point, so people say we're going to buy points, 1 point equals 1% of the mortgage amount. So in our example, our mortgage was 400,000, right? $500,000 home, putting $100,000 down, financing 400,000. 1 point, therefore, is 1% of that, or $4,000. So if you pay a point to the lender, okay, if when you go and get your mortgage, you pay 1 point to the lender, you're paying 1% of $400,000 is 4,000 to the lender. So you're asking, well, that's weird. Why would I pay the lender $4,000? And here's the reason. Effectively, when you buy a point, you're sort of prepaying the interest on the loan. You do this for one reason, because when you buy points, typically your APR on your loan goes down. So in our fictitious example, you might have had in our example, a 6% APR, and that would imply with no points. And what the lender would tell you is, so listen, they'll say, we can give you a 6% loan with no points, but if you pay 1 point, we'll maybe give you a 5.7% loan. And maybe they'll even say, and if you pay 1.5 points, we'll give you like a 5.4% loan. So the idea is 1 point represents 1% of the mortgage amount. So in our case, 1 point would be $4,000. 1.5 points would be 1.5% times $400,000 or 6,000. And you say, well, Young, why would I possibly pay it? Well, you pay the points up front because you're paying these points at closing. You're paying them up front. You would pay these points at closing to potentially lower your APR. And when you lower your APR, you lower your monthly payment. So points is once again one of those balancing acts, one of those trade-offs. You'll pay some points up front. You'll pay a couple of grand up front to reduce your APR and therefore to reduce your monthly payment. The decision on whether or not to pay for points comes down to what we call in finance a break-even decision. Under this, what you're going to do, so to decide, hey, should I buy the points or not, you figure out how much the points cost. You then divide that by the monthly savings from the lower payment. The answer that you get is the number of months that you need to stay in the house to make the points pay off. So here's an example. Let's just say here that you got 1 point for $4,000. We just made this number up. And let's say that by purchasing those points, your APR falls and you save $160 per month on your mortgage. So you say, okay, I'm going to buy 1 point for $4,000, and that's going to save me $160 a month. You take the $4,000 that you paid, you divide that by the 160 that you save, and the answer is 25. This is the number of months that you need to stay in the house to break even and make the points worthwhile. If you're going to stay in the house for more than 25 months, then you'll have saved more money in mortgage payments than you paid for the points. So you take the points. If you plan on staying in the house less than 25 months, then you will not save enough money to justify buying the points. So points represent an upfront price you pay, 1 point being 1% of the mortgage. That gives you pay up front for the benefit of a lower monthly payment, because when you pay for the points, you get a lower interest rate. Lower interest rate, lower monthly payment. By dividing the price of the points by the monthly savings, your answer is going to be an N, and that's going to be measured in months, and that's the number of months that you need to stay in the house to make the points pay off. So that's points. They're a bit of an advanced topic, but I want to bring them up because a part of our goal is to borrow responsibly. So you always want to consider points if the break even works in your favor. If you say, I'm going to be in this house for 20 years, you're probably going to want to take the points because you'll pay a little bit of money up front, but you'll get 20 years worth of monthly savings. And the lower your mortgage payment goes, the more cash flow you have freed up for other things. Of course, the trade-off is this 4,000 gets added to your closing costs, so you got to raise that cash up front. That's points. Refinancing is a process by which you take out a new loan to pay off an existing loan. Why would you do that? Well, in our example, we had a 6% loan, 6% APR. Let's say that something occurred. So you take out this 6% loan and you're making your monthly payments and everything's going swimmingly and you're very happy. But then you notice that for external reasons, generally the Federal Reserve making interest rate changes, mortgage rates have gone from 6% down to 5%. And you say, well, damn, I'm paying 6%. My monthly payment would be a lot lower at 5%. Wish I can cash in on that action. Well, you can. Because what you do, if the interest rates go down enough to make the break even work out for you, you would go get a new mortgage at the 5% lower rate, use those proceeds to pay off your 6% lower rate. Sorry, your 6% higher rate. Let me try that again. Sorry. So you've got a 6% loan, you're making a payment. Interest rates go down to 5%. You figure out your balance due on the loan. That's why we did this question right here. You figure out the balance due on your loan. You then go and take out a new loan for that existing balance at 5%. Take that loan and pay off the loan that you had at 6%. In the end, you still owe the same amount, but by taking out a lower rate loan to pay off a higher rate loan, you owe the same amount, but you've lowered your APR. Refinancing lowers your APR, which lowers your monthly payment, which, going back to our systems thinking, when you lower your monthly payment, remember, income comes in and it goes to obligations, luxuries, and savings and investment. One of your obligations includes your pity. If your monthly payments go down, then the amount spent on your obligations goes down, which frees up a little bit more money to either spend a bit more on luxuries or to save and invest more. We're always looking at systems and how a decision on one factor plays itself through that system. So why would you refinance? You would refinance to take advantage of a lower interest rate to reduce your monthly payment, to lower your pity, to reduce your obligations payout, freeing up some cash to be deployed elsewhere, either for current living or for future living. That's points. That's refinancing. Slightly advanced ideas, but another way to think about mortgages through a systems lens and to understand a tool that will help you to achieve, I hope for you, one of your biggest life goals, home ownership. Okay? That wraps it up for our housing lecture. Hope you've learned a lot. If you have any questions, reach out. Thank you for your time, and I will see you, my friends, next time. Okay? Take care.